Hello, animators and artists. DeepBluelnk is a British artist who publishes independent animation on YouTube. The subject of Blue's work often includes creative interpretations of scenes from popular online series and podcasts, including Drawfee, Game Changer, and My Brother, and Me. We invited Blue onto our live stream to discuss his experience producing independent animation on YouTube, as well as his new series, Deep Space Discounts. Hello, Blue, and welcome to the live stream.
Hi, Mike. Thank you for having me.
So, Blue, let's get into it. Like, what is your origin story, and how did you become an independent animator?
Yeah, so I've been animating on and off since my second year of university, which was, why would I try to remember the year now? I think 2017, so 8 years now. Starting off purely as a hobby. In my second year of uni, I had the world's worst landlords, and I basically had no internet access. So I distinctly remember having the thought of what is a hobby I could take up that uses as much time as possible. What is the most time-consuming activity I can do when I have no internet? And it came from a love of lots of YouTube animators at the time, and kind of Game Grumps animated specifically. But it kind of grew from there. It was a hobby until about 2020, when I was furloughed from my job during COVID. And after spending about 2 weeks solid playing Animal Crossing, one of my friends reached out to me and said, "Oh, I bet you're really glad that you've got animation as a hobby and something that you can do when all this is happening." And I went, "Oh my God, I forgot I animate." And I picked that back up again. I was listening to My Brother and Me religiously at the time, and thought I can just do a couple of clips of this for fun. And one of them took off. Griffin McElroy's Porky Pig animated, which the thumbnail is just over my virtual right shoulder on the wall there. And yeah, that got a bit of attention. I got my first commission off the back of that from the Sorry for the Wait podcast. And that was the kind of moment I thought, how people will actually pay me to make these silly cartoons. I went back to work. I got unfurloughed, but kept animating after work and all of my spare time, essentially. Yeah, after doing that part-time, kind of as, again, I guess as a hobby, but for money, a money hobby, I was reached out to by College Humor, who offered me a short contract, and it was enough to pay a couple of months of rent. And I thought, right, let's see if we can do this full time. So I quit my job, made some animations for Dimension 20. Since then, I've made a few music videos. I've been building a bit of a following on YouTube, and just kind of finding work where I can, building a very kind audience on Patreon, who are now, I think, over 1,000 people strong, which I struggle to say out loud without shaking, because that doesn't seem right still, but I checked it and it is. But
awesome.
It's amazing. I'm so grateful for them, and I don't think I'll ever be able to properly express it. So I will just keep working to get that across to them. So yeah, in terms of how did I become an independent animator, I think it's just a slow burn into kind of picking up the pennies where I can, and being lucky enough that the pennies are coming a bit easier now, so I can do things like make my own show.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that you got your start interpreting scenes from a podcast. Like podcasts, I think are kind of really perfect for that kind of project because you have this like really expressive audio, especially with like my brother and me.
Mm.
But you don't have any visuals to kind of bias like what you are producing.
Yeah, I think especially for a lot of the smaller podcasts that have commissioned me in the past, and that does include Mabim Bam. I think that disconnect with any visuals makes it difficult to share podcasts sometimes. I think the way I usually get into podcasts is either from, things like animations or just people talking about them. I rarely will like hear a podcast clip kind of in the wild. It usually is alongside something. So I got into my brother and me from a Louis Zong animatic.
Which are
And
fantastic, by the way. I
they
love
are fantastic.
Louis' animatics.
He's amazing. And it's one of these where, yeah, I think for a lot of people having, some visuals to put on top of the audio just makes it a little bit more shareable, I guess, from a content creator brained approach.
I mean, that's the case too. Like much of the internet is a very visual medium if you think about like a feed,
Mm.
and audio is kind of the opposite of being visual. It's just like a waveform. You don't really see that if you're just scrolling past.
Yeah, exactly. It certainly grabs the attention more, I think, having uh an animation kind of in front of it. And that, to be honest, that's a slightly self-deprecating attitude towards it as well, because I recognize that animations also add to the audio. I think you can introduce your own personality and find extra humor in the audio where you can. I certainly try to. um so worst case scenario, you're making something audio more palatable. Best case scenario, you're building on it and adding an extra layer of comedy where you can.
So, one of the reasons why I wanted to invite you onto this live stream is to understand a bit more about how indie animation can be a career. One of the challenges of producing independent animation is that independence also means that you don't have a studio supporting you with a production budget. So, how do you sustain your projects, and is it something that you need to actively think about?
Um, I I guess to the extent that I actively think about I actively think about doing it all myself. That's a good way of reducing a budget. It's for me, because everything is so solo and so independent, it's more a case of actively thinking about time as a budget, I guess. All of my animations apart from deep space discounts have cost me zero. They've cost me whatever energy it costs to run my computer. But I have in my mind a set amount of time that I need for each one. I've kind of created an unrealistic schedule for myself, which is animating and uploading a 90 second to 2 minute animation every week or every other week. And I think you just kind of have to find the time to make all of that. So I don't think of the production budget in terms of money, but certainly as a individual creator, I try to think, right, what can I realistically do in 4 days, or what can I realistically create in 3 to 5 days. That's something I actively think about. And I guess it has quietly informed the way that I work and the way that I produce animations over the last few years. um certainly the first few years that I was doing this full time, I had a lot of concentration on, how to speed up the process, a process which was already quite fast, but I kept thinking, right, how can I shave the seconds off of, the process each week? And sometimes that means, discovering new tools like Toon Boom's master controller, which is a godsend and I will always be grateful for. Sometimes it's thinking up ideas for an animation and saying, actually, I don't think I can do that myself in a month, so I will scrap it and coming back to something else. But no, in terms of a monetary budget, it doesn't come up for me, unfortunately. There's no budget to consider.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the challenges too with self-published independent animation on a platform like YouTube is to keep people engaged, you have to be releasing content fairly often.
Mm,
And for like longer form content, like when we're getting into like a 20-minute episode,
mm.
you can't really produce that in a week.
No,
It's
you
not really
can't.
feasible, especially as a solo animator, that's impossible.
we'll we'll
Um,
we'll have a word with YouTube's algorithm soon.
but do you like think about also the process of like building an audience and sustaining that audience?
Yeah, definitely. It's something that I thought about a lot more, at the start of this process when I was first trying to build an audience. I was very keen for about a year on getting to 100,000 subscribers for no real reason other than I wanted the little silver award button that they send you in the post. But when I had that in mind, I definitely had one ear to the ground of, well, when are viewers subscribing? What videos is it that people like? What videos is it that are convincing people to, click the button and things like that? Luckily, I don't have to do that as much now. It's just kind of at a level that I'm quite comfortable with. I'll never say no to more channel growth, but it's not something I'm like actively pursuing anymore, which I'm grateful for. And it means that I get to do things again, like create my own show in my own downtime, and then still, you know, I do think about, keeping the audience engaged to the extent that I didn't, fully drop the channel when I produced this miniseries. I still uploaded one animation every other week instead of every week. So I still, wanted to make sure I was keeping people, engaged and make sure they know they're still loved when I was working on the secret project. Um, but yeah, it's all kind of. I think I'm lucky enough that I don't have to think about it too much anymore, which is nice.
I also think like another thing that I know from talking to artists working on YouTube or publishing on YouTube is I think every YouTube channel goes through like a I hate the YouTube algorithm sort of moment where they publish like a complainer video about the state of YouTube.
Mm.
Have you ever had like frustrations with the algorithm, or is that not something that really was a part of your experience in the channel?
It's it's one of these where I think I came into the game late enough that I already knew the algorithms not great. It's one of these where I kind of anytime I've got, an issue with the way that the algorithm runs or anything like that, I kind of take a moment to myself and think like, you knew this. You knew this is what it was. This isn't surprise. This isn't news to you. Like,
It was post
um
2020.
yeah, right. Like there's no point where I thought YouTube loved, small creators and actively went out of its way to share new concepts. Like, no, I understand that, the algorithm is, an equation. It knows what gets lots of clicks and it rewards you for making things that get lots of clicks. And I don't, you know, I don't bend over backwards to serve the algorithm, but I certainly don't go out of my way to try and fight it. um, and also, I think most people will know that if you make a video that says "I hate the algorithm," weirdly, it doesn't do very well. There's not a great deal of use posting things like that. So um, in the same sense that I've avoided ever posting a video that's like my 100,000 subscriber special. You know, I'll comment at places and I'll be proud of it and I'll post it on Blue Sky and things, but I know that the YouTube algorithm won't share things like that. So to the extent that I essentially want to keep my YouTube channel looking as clean as possible, I will just kind of upload content and keep myself to myself in as much as I can.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's interesting, right? Because those milestones or also friction with the platform matters a lot to the creator. It
Mm,
doesn't necessarily like the audience doesn't necessarily feel the same way about it, which I think
yeah.
is interesting.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, I don't think I've ever clicked on a video that said like, you know, this is my 100,000 subscriber special, and it's like a 2 minute video. It's like I know what they're gonna say. I'm proud of them. I'll like another video. I don't really need to watch it.
See, I'm a weirdo, and I think I usually click a lot on those videos, but that's probably because of my specific career path. I wanted to ask you because we're talking a lot about some of the challenges that go into independent animation,
Mm.
but also I think it's worth talking too about like why you do what you do. And from your point of view, what does independence allow you to achieve as an artist that you wouldn't be able to explore in a studio environment?
Yeah, well, take everything I'm about to say with a pinch of salt because I've never worked in a studio environment. I've never even visited. If anyone in the UK runs an animation studio and wants to put me up for a week, I'd love to see what the process is like, and have, you know, a rough idea of what the pipeline is. Um, but from what I can guess, I think independence, if nothing else, definitely means speed. It definitely helps me, you know, streamline the process as much as I want to and as much as I can. Um, you know, if I for the first 4 years of working full time, I didn't storyboard my animations. I just took the audio and I just animated scene by scene. I could roughly hear in my mind where, like, you know, the camera would cut, someone else starts talking, or, you know, some kind of goof would happen that I could animate in the background. Um, Being able to cut down the pipeline as much as, you know, suits me in the moment, I think is a big benefit to working completely independently. Certainly, again, working on deep space discounts, it has helped with a kind of cohesiveness with the project. It's something that I don't have to worry about as much with my animations of other people's products, I guess, because, you know, they've already thought about the audio. It's already come together for a reason. Um, but in terms of writing a show, then directing the voice actors in a way that matches the writing, then finding, you know, the voice actors' lines that matches the concept I first had when writing it, and then later to match it to the storyboard, and then after that to finally animate it, you know, fully and render it. To know in my mind what I first meant when I, you know, wrote a line certainly helps, I think. Then I'm guessing in a studio environment, there's a lot of communication that needs to happen for it to, you know, come across the way as originally, you know, intended. Um, so yeah, it's a lot quicker by myself, and it's a lot more as intended, I would guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, right? Because all of the communication that would be happening in a studio
Mm.
is happening inside your head.
And there's a lot of communication happening inside my head. I'd love to quieten it a little bit. I'd love to have a silent day, but yeah.
Well, I want to talk to some of those voices. So, um, how would you describe Deep Space Discounts? What is the show about? Like, give us a pitch of what Deep Space Discounts is about.
Yeah, so Deep Space Discounts is a mini animated series following the titular discount store, a space sailing superstore that is run, staffed by a group of ragtag alien misfits, and more importantly, alien criminals. Um, Emmy is certainly our leading character, and she is the first human to ever be sent to Deep Space Discounts. And we spend these 5 episodes following her as she comes to terms with her new life and her new family, a new work family.
Yeah, I mean,
um,
what I found really interesting too about the premise of the series. I've seen the first episode that you released. Was it released this week?
yeah, last Friday. Sorry, second episode tomorrow.
Yeah. So I found it to be very relatable. Um, uh, but I guess my biggest question for you is like, how did the project develop over time? Like, when did you first conceive of Deep Space Discounts and decide like I want to create a original series?
Hmm.
And how did that change from that first initial concept to what you published?
So I I think probably like most people that work in creative jobs, I'll go on a walk and be like, "Oh, I could definitely make a show," and then after about an hour, forget what the idea was and decide it was stupid. So I've been doing that on and off for years anyway. But again, building this YouTube channel, the kind of the dream at one point was to work in a studio and work as an animator working on a project like this. And then as time went on, I kind of thought, well, I wonder if I could make something like this myself, but never really had the confidence of now is the right time to start. Because anytime I'll like look at an animation of mine that's, let's say, like 6 months old, it will be unrecognizable in my mind, where I'll say like, oh, this is so much better now than it was 6 months ago. So I'll always think, well, unless I can make a show in 6 months, it's going to change quality from first episode to last episode anyway. So I couldn't think of a right time to really knuckle down and say, right, now is the time. But then last October, no, not last October, the previous October 2023, I did a stream on a channel called Drawfee, who I animate a lot of, and one of the guests on there with me at the same time was Barrett Leddy, who's a voice actor who's worked on things like Yu-Gi-Oh! And Pokemon and worked with Disney. Um, and I animated a clip of him from a previous episode. And I think he just sent out a message saying, if you ever wanted to work on anything, by the way, I love your animations and I'd love to work with you. And it kind of, I think that was the spark, the touch paper where I went, oh, if I've got like a really professional, good voice actor, that would be a great place to start. So I went on a walk and I came up with another idea. um, and from that point, just kind of, I'm trying to think what the full process was. I think I came up with a concept, the idea of intergalactic store, very much inspired by a retail job that I had in my early 20s. And thought, what if it was run by criminals? What if our protagonist is a human? I saw like an interesting idea, and I thought, right, I could probably build on this. And then, yeah, I think it was just a case of writing episode ideas down at first. I had like about 20 different ideas of what could I kind of do in 3 minutes. A lot of this was inspired by Big Top Burger, I should say, off the bat, by Worthy Kids, who, again, himself was able to create these amazing, very short form animations that
They're
eventually kind
wild,
of
like absolutely mind blowing.
they're so good and they're so funny. But the fact that he eventually got them to kind of tie up in a real story, I think that was the kind of heart drop moment where I went, oh my god, it can be done. And similar to Alistair's, Hugo's Mind Palace is another pilot on YouTube, a bit longer, but again, just produced by one student in Bristol and a handful of friends, I think. It was one of these where I kind of thought, this is going to sound cocky actually, but it was a point where I thought, if someone else can do it, I'll give it a go. Yeah, I just kind of started coming up with ideas of how this show could kind of materialize. I think I had 2 weeks off at Christmas and I just wrote as much as I could and then picked out what I thought were 5 good kind of episodes. And then from that developed like a professional looking script, sent it to Barrett, and said, is this something you'd be interested in? He said yes. He then also very kindly, and I think this was another turning point in the process, said, would you like me to help you cast this? And I went, oh my God, yes, that would be fantastic. He, put together a description for the show. He sent out like an audition request to a lot of people that he worked with. And this project, which I originally had planned to kind of crack out in maybe like 3 months and find, some voice actors on Twitter at the time or whatever, suddenly became a thing where I had almost 100 professional voice actors who I recognized applying to be on it, and I went, "Oh no, this is a real show now." Started panicking and thought, right, I need to really put time and effort into this. And it kind of from that point, I think, became what it is today, which was something that I, you know, always loved and was always a passion project. But from that point on, I thought, oh, I need to take this seriously, I think. And I did.
Yeah, I mean, I think also one thing that's really interesting, is like you uh found professional voice actors and paid them for their work, which is
Yes.
cool. I think there are a lot of cases where people starting out in like indie animation think, well, I'm a little guy and I don't need to pay people. But it's good to be able to treat other artists well too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I say this with a sensitivity of that, a lot of people starting projects like this don't have any budget. But I will say these amazing, like, celebrated voice actors did not cost a horrendous amount. I won't say how much because I don't know if they've lowered their budget for me. None of them have admitted that, and according to Barrett, I'm paying over industry for certain things. But yeah, the idea that I won't go on a soapbox because I don't understand it enough to do so. The idea that AI voice acting is becoming, a consideration for these companies that have millions and millions of dollars and pounds to put behind these projects is so infuriating. And I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on the stream, so I won't. But to hell with AI voice acting. It's not good. Don't do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that with animation, right? Animation is a very human medium.
Yeah,
People are reacting to drawings, right?
yeah.
And there are just countless decisions that go into each drawing, and all the artists contributing to a project bring expertise and
Mm,
skill. Using software like Harmony, Harmony is kind of the opposite of like a it does it for you type
mhm,
of
mhm.
program. Like you kind of have to do everything, and once
Yeah.
you set it up, it can be very efficient.
Mm.
But you're like you can't just find someone out on the street and be like, "Hey, do you want to animate using Harmony Premium?" Because the answer is they're not going to probably get very far if they don't have experience with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And as lucky as we are to have as many amazing kind of tutorials on YouTube. I mean, I've said before that I didn't have any education animation, but Onion Skins, the Bird Brain, Jesse J. Jones, Drawn Sean, they are my teachers. I wouldn't know anything about animation, let alone Toon Boom Harmony, without the amazing amount of tutorials that you can find for free online. But like you say, unless you're actually willing to learn and put in the time and effort to build those skills, it's not
Yeah.
it's not a free pass.
Since we're talking about drawings, I really like your art style. Like
Thank
it's
you.
very unique. There aren't a lot of things that look like it. I love how like on your self portrait, right? Like your glasses are bigger than the rest of your face.
Don't bring
Uh,
up the glasses.
but like stylistically, like what are some of the sources of inspiration that you draw from? Like what sorts of either art or animation do you look at and sort of incorporate into the way that like you think about drawing characters?
Yeah, I think I struggle trying to think of really specific art styles that look anything like this. The kind of closest from like a visual point of view I can think of is a YouTube animator called Brandon Turner. He did a lot of Game Grumps animated. Um, but I mean, growing up watching The Simpsons constantly, Futurama, I get a lot of kind of animation gags from SpongeBob. You know, the kind of zoom in, gross out thing is definitely a SpongeBob
The
thing.
gross up, close up.
Yeah, that's it. um, and then from more of an animation point of view, I think the focus on, because a lot of my animation is done ironically for this PNG tuber from shoulders up. There's not a huge amount of kind of body animation or kind of action that I do in mine. It's a lot of focus on facial expressions and, you know, shoulders up animation. I think a lot of the kind of focus on facial expressions might have come from Steven Universe and Adventure Time. You know, they're very good shows at expressing kind of the raw emotion of moments, and they're really good at, you know, pulling on your heartstrings when they need to. Um, there might be some influence from like Bob's Burgers in the kind of subtlety of animation. They Some of the funniest animation I can think of is from things like Bob's Burgers, where there's basically no animation happening. Um, this is probably too niche an example, but there's one of Bob doing like patty cake with I can't remember his name now.
Louise, right?
No, the handyman. What the
Oh,
fuck's his name?
um,
Him. Anyway,
yeah.
but like H. John Benjamin, or whatever his name is like screaming into the microphone, but Bob's face just doesn't move at all. And it's the funniest thing.
Teddy.
It's Teddy, thank you. Yeah, and it's one of these where I think, you know, I've talked about trying to animate as quickly as possible, and I try to avoid that equaling as lazily as possible. But if I can find humor in low effort animation, I'll certainly try.
Yeah, I mean, I think that like juxtaposition can be very funny.
Mm, yeah, I'd certainly think so. It's one of these where I think I read an article on Toon Boom's website about oh, who was it against? Carol versus the End of the World, and about
Yes.
like again the subtlety of animation, that you don't need necessarily to have, you know, huge movements, and you don't need to see the character's hands every every frame. Sometimes you do just need to see, you know, two characters talking to each other, and as long as you can tell, you know, what they're thinking, and if, you know, if that's just facial expressions, then I think that's, you know, that's all you need sometimes.
I kind of like that because you hear whenever like a director or a writer does like an animated project for the first time, you know, they're originally in like live action, they go into animation,
Mm.
and they say like in animation we can do anything. Um, but like the opposite of that is like in animation you can do like little things.
Yeah, yeah, it's, you know, again, having never live directed in my life, it's a lot easier to animate the tiniest micro expression of like an eyebrow changing, or, you know, the twitch of an eye is so much easier to kind of get across in an animation than, you know, anything else, especially when you kind of keep the animation subtle. And I think it's, I don't know if this is the term, but I kind of consider it limited animation. What I do, it's not, you know, constant movements. It's, you know, very much going from one keyframe to another. Um, and I think having that lack of movement means that when something changes, no matter how small, you do usually notice it. It's something where it kind of, it makes it easier to point the audience's attention where you want them to, which is very useful, especially in comedy.
Yeah, another concept I'm thinking of too is like in Scott McCloud's book Understanding Comics, you know, he'll talk about how the more simple and less detailed a character is,
Mm.
in some ways it can be more expressive, and it can also be like because of the way pareidolia works, the human like
Yeah.
mind sees faces where there aren't faces. All you need are like two dots and like a little U, and you have a
Yeah.
smiling face.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
so like you can have like a twitching eye by just moving like one line underneath the eye.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I think that's definitely something I picked up on again from Adventure Time more than anything. You know, it's very simple facial expressions, but they're so expressive in the same breath. Um Yeah, and also another thing I should say, a benefit of having characters that just have big round heads like this in my style, especially when using Toon Boom Harmony Premium, where you have master controllers, is when a character turns their head, you don't have to worry about a chin or a jaw. It looks the same from any direction. It's great.
That's awesome. Actually, I wanted to ask about the design process on the
Yeah.
characters from Deep Space Discount. Can you talk through some of the characters and like how you thought through how their personalities could show through from the designs?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't know how common this is, but it was maybe backwards in the sense that I drew characters before I came up with their personalities or the characters. I kind of it it's very early on in the process where I had the concept for the show, but at this stage I didn't have any ideas for the characters. Um, I I literally I remember I've got a picture somewhere I can probably send you later, but on my phone's notes app, I drew 20 circles, as perfect circles as I could make them. And I just spent an hour doodling on them and coming up with as many different alien kind of designs as I could. After about an hour, I took 4 colored pens again from the notes app and basically checked next to each one whether I thought it was great, good, okay, or bad. And then just kind of repeated that process until I had, at the time, I think 6 that I really liked. Looking back on it, because I looked at it the other day, Claire's was actually the only one out of those first 20 that was red. It was one that I really didn't like at first, and I really struggled to kind of narrow down to a fine point. Um, Shockingly, it's also the only design that at the time it was important that she had a jaw. So again, in terms of my general art style, I think I like circles. um, but yeah, it was one of these where once I had, I think at the time it was, like I say, about 5 or 6 good designs, I could kind of see what personality they had. And then once I had an idea for a personality, I was able to then start writing them. And once I had something written down, I was able to fine tune the designs a bit. Um, this whole show was made in Toon Boom, and I knew it was going to be from the start. I've been using it for about 3 or 4 years, I think. So when I was designing these, I had their character rigs in mind, and I thought, like, how would this work? How would this person's hair kind of turn with a 360? What would the back of this character's head look like? Is this doable to an extent? Um, yeah, I think basically the design process was just create as many characters as I can, see what sticks. And then once I had them kind of drawn out, I've got some concept art somewhere. Again, I will probably post sometime after episode 5. But I had some concept art and then took that and made a character rig straight away and said, okay, this is now the final, design. I wasn't too clingy to those original concept designs. I was kind of ready for those to be chopped and changed when I needed to.
Yeah, so I just want to like touch on a few things. One of which is like you are designing these characters, you're writing the show,
Mhm,
you are doing creating the rigs and the
mhm.
animation. You have an impressive voice cast, which you are also a member of,
Yeah.
and you made an entire 5 episode animated series with like each episode being 6 minutes. That's like 30 minutes plus of animation
Mhm.
by yourself. I just have one question. How?
um. Uh, uh, Hard grind. Kids these days don't know work. No, I have no idea. I'm starting to learn now that this is out and in the public that it is maybe a bit more impressive than I thought it was. Um, like I've been really, getting it down to a science of animating quickly. And again, that means, finding tools like Toon Boom Harmonies, Master Controller, and it's also just getting less precious with storyboarding. If you saw the storyboards for this series, you would cry because they are the roughest, like tiniest thumbs. But they do the job perfectly, and it's one of these where I've spent 4 or 5 years just trying to kind of speed up this process, I guess. Um, in terms of how I was able to do so much so quickly, I've been animating about 90 seconds to 120 seconds per week for about 5 years now. So I think that lines up with how much time I've spent on Deep Space Discounts. I think it's been about 30 weeks total. So yeah, I'm surprised with this is horribly conceited. I'm surprised how good some of it is. I'm not gonna lie. I'm already, I struggle with imposter syndrome a lot of the time, and I appreciate that I'm a decent animator. And again, character rigs happen behind the scenes, so I'm quite happy to say that they're decent. Um, I'm really happy with the response to the writing. I was really unsure if it was actually any good. And hearing, I've got over 2,000 comments, I think, on the first video in a week, and they're all shockingly kind and excited to find more. So, um, yeah, it's a lot, but it doesn't feel like it. It's all felt like such a passion project and something I've always um prioritized. I think when I work as well is making sure that I'm comfortable when I'm working. I'm always listening to music. I've got a very aesthetically pleasing desk to stare at all day. I make sure to go on a walk whenever I can in the morning before I work. It's one of these where if you can kind of look after your mental health as much as you can, it does mean that you're able to put in 50-hour weeks and not feel too burnt out from it. I should say as well, I also got married last year, so trying to plan a wedding at the same time as all this.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a lot, and I'm going to be very glad to have a little sleep after I've finished animating episode 5.
Yeah, but the thing that you said earlier, that you felt surprised that it was like really good, is actually a pretty common thing I hear from artists and animators.
That's good.
Even like working in studios where like you see you work on your little piece of it, you see the end result, you're like, wow, we made a TV show. um, can be kind of a surreal feeling.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that's a universal thing then. Yeah, there's definitely an element of that. I should say as well, it's kind of you to, and I know I've done it myself, so I see why you've called me a member of this voice cast. I've cast myself as Bucket, a robot who I think in the whole series has, I think, 7 words to say. He says one word about 20 times in the 3rd episode, which you've all got to look forward to. But it was a case of I can do a good robot voice. I knew I didn't want to talk to a professional voice actor and say, hi, I've got a role that involves saying the word oil 20 times in a row. Can you can you let me know a price? And I've been using this voice as a party trick for years anyway. I don't think it's going to come across well on the microphone, so I'm not sure I'll do this, but it's just hello. It's just that with like a high pass filter over it. So it didn't need, a real voice actor. So it's a role I'm quite happy to give myself.
I want to ask you because you mentioned already that you use Harmony and use rigs and
Mhm.
master controllers. But what does your animation production pipeline or animation process look like? Do you do roughs by hand and then do the cleanup using rigs, or do you like think while you're posing the rigs?
Um, so I at the moment, especially with Deep Space Discounts, I have a storyboard. I think if I'm being honest, if I showed it to anyone in the industry, they would not call it a storyboard. They would call it thumbs, I think. Is that a term? These are
I
very,
mean, it can be contentious because I think there are some storyboard artists who would say like storyboard should be rough,
yeah,
and that the fact that a lot of storyboards that you see are very clean is a symptom of the production pipeline that requires outsourcing
yeah.
to other studios where there's like less communication than you'd have in house.
Mm,
And I think there are arguments for making very clean storyboards, and there are arguments for making very rough storyboards that then allow the animators to make more interpretation.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, if this image on your screen now was a thumb, it is literally, a freehand circle and then two lines coming down off of it to indicate a body, maybe a third line to show the desk, but I'd probably remember there was meant to be a desk there. So it's not, you know, it's not an intricate process. Deep Space Discounts is a little bit more intricate. I even had the little crosshair on the face to show where the face was pointing most of the time, which is rare. But the full process for this project for Deep Space Discounts was, as I say, creating these character designs, then writing the show, sending the script out to voice actors. I had the whole storyboard for the whole show ready before I reached out to Barrett. So I actually did like a scratch record of it as well. So there is a version of Deep Space Discounts where it's me doing every voice, which I'm sure I will find a way of releasing somehow, maybe behind a paywall. It's not great. I maybe would like to get paid for people to see that. But yeah, I mean, certainly for the stuff on YouTube, it's usually just taking the audio, putting it straight into Toon Boom Harmony. I don't use Storyboard, or I don't have Storyboard, but putting it straight into Harmony, just drawing straight onto the screen any kind of storyboard, making that transparent, and then animating on top of that. Pretty much every character rig that I use has evolved from the very first character rig that I made of Griffin McElroy. When I streamed, we had like a bit of an ongoing joke that Griffin McElroy is like the common ancestor. So there's something that I don't point out much, but if you look above my glasses on the kind of head, you can see just above the glasses where the circle connects, where like one bit of the line is a little bit thicker than the rest of it, and that connection is on every single character rig because they're all the same circle. And that extends to Deep Space Discounts. They all have circular heads. They all have master controllers built off of the same like 12 frames I think I used to make the master controllers for these. So yeah, I've definitely got a template. It's fair to say.
Yeah, I mean, I think what can be difficult is like with animation. Animation is a medium where the audience can take the end result at face value very easily.
Hmm.
But like the drawings that you see at the very end, or the poses that you see at the very end, is just like the tip of the iceberg, because there's like so much work that goes into that before
Yeah.
the final render.
Yeah.
And I just think that it's really important for people to be able to see, like, hey, this actually takes work. Someone spent time doing this, usually a lot of someone's, in your case, one very dedicated someone. And I think that's what makes animation really cool, all of the
Hmm.
process that goes into it.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes if you try to skip over the process, you kind of miss the point.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think if nothing else, it's just that kind of, I think we talked about this, but the kind of the element that in animation everything is on screen is something that someone has thought about. And in this case, it's me, but everything that happens is there for a reason. There's a reason why, not this actually that you're seeing on screen. This is a PNG tuber. I'm not animating this live, but for most
That'd be very,
animations,
you're gonna get really tired really fast.
I've got carpal tunnel so bad. Yeah, it's one of these where, even if it looks effortless, of course there's been effort to it. And I found that when I did stream my animation process, having people in the chat say, why does he keep listening to the same 2 seconds of audio over and over again? It's been like an hour. And it's like, oh no, I've been animating this 2 seconds for an hour. These poor people that have had to listen to me just put this one clip on loop for that long. Yeah. And especially, like I say, with the importance of like micro expressions, I think, yeah, it's very easy to dismiss animation, as you say, but no,
Yeah.
it's
I mean, 2 seconds is what, like 48 frames if you're animating on ones, 24 if you're animating on twos.
yeah, yeah,
It's a lot to go through. That's an hour's work pretty
it
easily.
is. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you one question before I ask you the next one. The first question is, how do you feel about your work as an indie animator? Like, do you feel that you like your job, self-imposed, like your boss?
Yeah, definitely. It's one of these where, again, I've not got anything to concretely compare it to. I've never worked in an animation studio. I've certainly worked for bosses. I've had jobs, so I know what that feels like. Um, I definitely, even without that comparison, I can feel the freedom in what I do. I can feel that every decision I make is my own, and that I can make it immediately, and that's amazing. I wouldn't trade that for anything. Um, it's one of these where obviously the big uh, trade off for most people in the industry would be, you know, insecurity of money and insecurity of work and all of that. I think the more and more I see, and maybe this is just my fault for being online too much, the more and more I see of working in studios, the more it feels like being employed in the animation industry is about as insecure as being self-employed in the animation industry anyway. Um, so it's not something that I kind of am jealous of anymore. That kind of security of work, or working under someone. I think the thing that I would like most about working in a studio is having people to bounce ideas off of, or see what other people's process is. That's something that's missing from being an independent animator. But otherwise, it's perfect working conditions. I get out of bed, I go to the next room, I sit at my desk, and I work for as long as I want to. And usually that's about 8 hours. I can have a shower in the middle of the day. I can have half an hour for lunch. It's a lovely life, to be honest.
Okay, so I wanted to ask how you're feeling about it before I ask the next question. The next question is, do you have advice for artists who are interested in pursuing independent animation full time?
Yeah, I mean, again, take all of this with a pinch of salt, because this is coming from someone that's never been employed by anyone in an artistic job. But depending on where you are in the process or in your career, my first bit of advice to people just starting or just trying to, like, I don't want to make it sound too clinical and like business like, but to people who are first trying to make money from it, definitely start a Patreon or something similar to that. Um, a bit of very concrete but niche advice is, when you start a Patreon, it tells you not to set up a tier for $1, because they take a little bit more money when you do that. Don't listen to them. Set up $1 tiers. If someone wants to give you money, don't set any kind of boundary to that. If someone wants to give me $1, I will happily take whatever it is, 83 cents of that, instead of, you know, 90 cents of $2 or something like that. It's one of these where make it as easy as possible for people to support you as you can. Certainly if you're going down my path, which is more of a content creation type path. Um Again, kind of following on from what I said before, advice for any artist, any animator, I would say make working as comfortable as possible. I remember reading, I think it was the Richard Williams survival guide book, and one of the first things it says is, "Don't listen to music." And I immediately shut the book and went, "It's not for me. It's not. This isn't right." Um, you
I mean,
know.
to be fair, that was Milk Call saying that he didn't listen to music while
Oh,
he was
okay.
animating.
I can't read. um, yeah, but definitely there's some kind of saying that's like, if you're going to become a master at something, you need to put in 1,000 hours of practice. So make it easy to put in 1,000 hours of practice. If that means taking constant breaks, if that means splitting your job up into 5 different parts, if that means listening to music and having a sweets dispenser on your desk like I do, full of M&Ms, do whatever you can to make it easy to want to go to your desk, sit down, and do as much work as possible. Because if you're gonna, you know, pursue animation truly independent, as working completely by yourself, you're gonna want to be able to put in as many hours as possible. So, um, yeah, just try and make it as easy for yourself as possible to actually work. I'd say is as decent a widespread bit of advice as I can give, I think.
Wait, hang on. You have a sweet dispenser in your desk that dispenses M&Ms.
Hold on, I turned it off in case I accidentally set it off, but do you want to hear it?
Yes.
There we go.
It's
I'm
very
not going to
good.
eat them now. That's really, I've got a handful of M&Ms now. This is an awful idea, but yeah.
All right. Well, in that case, Blue, actually, we have one question from the audience.
Hmm.
I think this might be one of your followers.
Oh, no.
Will there be a beach episode of Beach-based discounts?
There's certainly not for these first 5 episodes, but when I think about what direction I want it to go in after these first 5 episodes, there's definitely room for something like that. This might not be something I follow up on, so don't put your hopes on this. But I like the idea of the cast.
They've already taken screenshots. They've already published like a Blue promises beach episode in season 2.
I like the idea of deep space discounts trying to expand into like deliveries, and then that way, you know, if I do have more people that can help me make the show and create more backgrounds more frequently, then yeah, I don't see why there couldn't be episodes where Imi has to deliver a spaceship specifically to a beach planet. You know, it's world's my oyster. Let's see what happens.
Blue, where can our audience go to see more of your work?
Pretty much all of my work is on YouTube. Deep Space Discounts is fully being released on YouTube for free. I'm on pretty much all the social medias now, but I spend most of my time on there promoting videos on YouTube. I'm also on TikTok. I'm also on Patreon if you want to give me money. If you don't know where to find my animations, I'm not going to ask you to give me money yet. Go look at go look at my YouTube first and then have a think. But yeah, pretty much all on YouTube at DeepBluelnk.
You also have a website too. Remember websites? Websites are great.
I do have a website, yeah, deepbluelnk.co.uk that has a load of merch on it for me specifically, and also now for Deep Space Discounts. It's got a picture of my cat. It's a great website.
All right. Well, thank you, Blue, for taking time to discuss your YouTube channel, as well as your new series, Deep Space Discounts. And thank you to our audience for taking time to join us today. If you enjoyed this discussion, you might also be interested in trying our 21-day free trial of Harmony Premium, which you can download from our website. The website is toonboom.com. Our next live stream is an art stream with Mariev Lassell, aka Zabirdbrain, and it is on Tuesday, January 14th. So you won't want to miss it. Thank you for joining us, and be sure to tune in next time. I think.